Hello, and welcome back to the channel. More specifically, the replay analysis series that I'm trying to develop here. It's where I break down the decision making of the players in the game to determine how they progress into a spectacular result, or whether they make any mistakes that end up costing them the game or make the game tighter than it already should be. This time we're watching Quokka, I'll be calling them Quokka for simplicity, driving the Centurion Action 10, the British Tier 10 medium tank. They are on the Mountain Pass map and are in the northern spawn. So, kicking things off, nothing really out of the ordinary here. Quokka and a number of allies have moved up to the northern edge of the lake to try and get some shots off at enemy tanks as they cross over. Quokka gets a nice shot off there early into the medium crossing, and I do believe gets another one off. I believe it's on this heavy tank. Notice they wait until the heavy tank rises up because of the low ground out, gives them an easy shot on the side of the hull. That's about it for the shots that they take, but you will notice that Quokka is now telling this Progetto 46 to fall back. What Quokka is demonstrating here is quite advanced map knowledge as well as positioning. They aren't just paying attention to their position, they are also paying attention to the position of their allies, especially this Progetto 65 in this case. The friendlies have not pushed down the one line. They've only taken one tank around the corner and there's barely any backup. What this has meant is the enemies are free to push that, but also they're free to take the overlook at Sector H3, and that overlook in turn has easy shots on tanks like the friendly Progetto 65. So what Quokka is doing is trying to warn them of that eventuality happening before it happens to save them a bit of health. Unfortunately, the Progetto 65 doesn't move from that position really. That's absolutely fine in this particular case because all they're up against is an enemy Progetto 65, so they're outside of an ammo rack or a fire, they're extremely unlikely to die outright. You can see the friendly 60 TP tries to get up and take a shot off in the potential 1v1 between the Progettos, but that 1v1 never happens, so the 60 TP is just stuck in the open now. And it's here where Quokka decides to relocate. You can be forgiven for thinking that Quokka has done this a little early. Even on the flank where I mentioned the friendly team have not pushed that much, the friendly UDES 15-16 has done an excellent job of staying alive against multiple enemies. So the friendlies are pushing in the north, they've managed to get one tank over the bridge and are holding the rest of the map. They aren't losing anywhere that requires Quokka to relocate to this position to help defend. The reason why Quokka has done this is to get more damage. You can see that they looked at the map and saw that the friendly that made it across the bridge is now being pushed, and you can see that Quokka has managed to get in a position where they can just shoot over and over again and make use of the Centurion's DPM to even the scales of the hit points, which if you look at the top of the screen are pretty outbalanced at this point. This decision is fantastic for two separate reasons really. The first is the timing. Quokka went so early because they didn't even wait for the friendly UDES 15-16, for example, to go down. They didn't wait for an enemy to force them to move, they just went prior to that happening. This meant that they are in a much better position to defend their base and friendly tanks for when the enemy do eventually push through in this game. The second reason why this decision was so good was because of the position itself. If you look to the minimap, you can see centered on Quokka's Centurion there are two large circles. One is yellow and the inner one is white. Don't worry too much about the yellow one for now, it's the white one we want to pay attention to. This represents the maximum possible spotting distance that you can achieve in World of Tanks. Even if your view range is longer than that, which is represented as 445 meters, you can't physically spot anybody further than that line. This is true for Quokka Centurion, of course, but it is also true for the enemies they are shooting at. So even if all of the obstructions you see on screen weren't there and there was a clear shot between the tanks, there is no chance that the enemies will spot them when they shoot. From here, it's just mopping up the hit points really. Those three enemy tanks have decided to push and are now in essentially a kill box. The Centurion's DPM is not fantastic, not the best at least for a tier 10 medium tank, but to be honest, a tier 9 or even a tier 8 medium in this position is probably going to get the work done. It might have some issues with penetration, especially against tanks like this, the VZ55. But Quokka also picks out this enemy IS-22 who has rushed the other flank. You can see that Quokka was hiding behind that rock the whole time, so they only get spotted once they back out from behind it. But they have done some excellent work in bringing their hit points back, but their team is still behind 4 tanks. While there's a bit of a lull in the action, I want to go over some niche, more unintended benefits of how Quokka has been playing this game. The first one is, of course, in the bottom left, Quokka's Centurion still has all of its hit points remaining. This is largely down to Quokka relocating so early. They simply denied the enemy the chance to shoot at them and denied them the chance at dealing damage. What this means is Quokka has a little bit more flexibility. They can afford to take positions, they can afford to risk their tank to perhaps take a hit on the corner of a fight, such as the one that they're trying to poke out of now. They can afford to sit out there and maybe use their faster reload to get an extra shot off and do a better trade as the T-30 comes around there and they just get the ambush shot off. But for example, if they wanted to, they could let the T-30 there just shoot them, and that would allow him to take 750 damage, but enough time to perhaps track, reload, and destroy that enemy tank destroyer. But now you see there's another push through the lake, and the enemy FV125B183 doesn't really get much done. I think they get a shot off at the 60 TP, but assuming they fired premium, I don't think that's going to do too much. It catches out the T-30 again, but puts them to a one-shot, which is fantastic news for the friendlies because it can't really poke anymore, and that is a very big gun that they don't want to deal with. But the Object 279E is doing what an Object 279E kind of just does all the time. Just sit there, take hits, and doesn't really care about what you're doing. Quokka is just sitting here spending a while seeing if that T-30 is going to try their luck again. This is a fair enough play. They're not under any kind of risk doing that, but you see the second relocation, major relocation at least, that Quokka makes. You can see that a friendly tank supporting the mouse just went down, and it's just the mouse left in against multiple enemies. And you see that the friendly T-30 as well as Quokka come back to help. They quickly shut down the enemy UDES and catch out the enemy Progetto before it gets away. So that's 2 tier 10 mediums out of the game, essentially for free. I couldn't really tell how much damage they did to the mouse before that happened. But you can see Quokka, again, utilising communication, is trying to get the mouse to come back as well as the T-30, because now there are only 3 of them left against 6 enemies. Quokka, as I mentioned before, is on full health. T-30 is looking fairly healthy, but the mouse is looking a little bit patchy. So let's see how Quokka deals with this situation. The first thing Quokka does, quite rightly, is they ascend the ramp back up again and try and extend the view range of their team once more, to try and find the enemy. They do proxy spot the Object 279E, as well as picking out the UDES 60 that's just clambered up through the lake entrance. Now, I'll go into a little bit more detail about the situation regarding the 279E, but I like that Quokka for now is not just running down there and slamming premium into it just to get rid of the O-power tank. They stay up there and unfortunately don't have the gun depression, I don't think, to deal with that at 121B, but do catch out the UDES. So let's dive into this, possibly the last engagement of this battle. The enemy 279E as well as the T-30 and the 121B lagging behind are coming from the south, whereas the UDES 1516, probably backed up by the enemy E75, is coming from the northern pass. My initial gripe with this whole situation is with the friendly mouse. While we can't expect every player to make the correct decision every single time, I am trying to pick apart the sort of mistakes in the larger games, so I am going to bring this up. I think the mouse was in the wrong position, and they did have an opportunity to be in the right position because there was a little bit of downtime between the engagements. So the mouse had the opportunity to come back and fight the same battle as we find Quokka and the T-30 fighting. So why do I think that this would be beneficial? Well, it all comes down to hit point balance. I've mentioned this before in a few videos, but the capability of a tank is very clearly stated. They operate at essentially maximum capacity because of the regenerated medkits and repair kits until they reach 0 hit points. If you look, the Object 279E has over 1,000 health, and as we'll see later, so does the 121B. So what that means is the T-30 on the friendly team cannot one-shot the enemy 279E. They need a follow-up shot either from themselves if they somehow survive, from Quokka, who has a fairly decent chance to be fair from their position, or the mouse. Obviously in this case the mouse is ruled out because they are too far away and in the wrong position, but Quokka can do it. However, the Quokka is going to deal with the enemy T-30 and will likely be on a reload. The point I'm trying to make is that the 279E will have an opportunity to just use its DPM and faster reload to deal with the friendly T-30 with absolutely no opposition because the mouse wasn't there to either cover the T-30 or just take a follow-up shot and kill it off. Okay, so let's have a look how Quokka deals with this. First off, they do the right thing, deal with the enemy T-30 and look for a shot into the back of the Object 279E. The friendly T-30 makes a little bit of a mistake but does manage to get a shot off into the back of the 121B. The 279E now begins climbing. Now, the Quokka is in a pretty decent position but realises they're just going to get overwhelmed, so they do make sure that shot goes into the 279E. And now they're up against 2 tier 10 mediums. One of them has more health. So what I like this from Quokka, they just dive down onto the bottom and try and deal with the low health enemy. They catch with a little bit of a lucky break here. The 121B tracks them and the UDES 1516 just flat out misses. Quokka now just face hugs this UDES 1516. Now you'd think that the UDES would be at an advantage here, but they're not because of a number of things. One, the Centurion is quite a tall tank, and you combine that with the quite decent gun depression and the special fact that the Centurion fires heat as premium, then Centurion is able to just shoot down into the angled upper plate of the UDES 1516, and because of the increased overmatch angles, is able to just go straight through and deal the damage. So Quokka now turns, I think it was a 1 versus 4 for a slight point, into a 1 versus 1 against the enemy E75, who hasn't been seen in a while. So Quokka has to deal with this final engagement against the enemy E75. The friendlies on the team who are dead have informed them that the E75 is not AFK. You can see from the scoreboard at the top right that the E75 does indeed have a kill to their name. So Quokka is just scouting out their previous position just to check to see if they just stuck on the wall, flipped over or something like that. But that doesn't appear to be the case, and they don't go all the way down to their southern position here. They circle back around and want to stay, I believe, in range of the base, and that's primarily because something like that might happen. The enemy E75 just drove into the cap for the shortest period of time. So now that Quokka knows where the E75 is, the only tank standing between them and victory and indeed a pause medal, they have to run the numbers on the engagement. They have absolutely outclassed them on DPM. The Centurion, while not good for a tier 10 medium, has a much better DPM than the E75. So the only option the E75 has is getting a ambush shot off with the largest gun in its arsenal, the 128mm. Now, the 128mm has 530 average damage, and the Centurion here has 560 health left. So we're talking roughly 20 to 30% chance that this Centurion dies in one shot. So Quokka is taking their chances and is just going to drive in to the base. Now the enemy E75 thought Quokka was still on the hill, so they take a shot, try and dive into cover, but unfortunately the E75 notices they've been shot in the side, turns the round and just plants one in and high rolls into oblivion, snatching the pool's medal and the victory. So was this final engagement a mistake from Quokka? Personally, I don't think so. The top graphic, as well as holding Alt on the keyboard, would also show that the E75 was most certainly a two-shot. Only two really bad low rolls or a tracking shot that did no damage would result in Quokka needing 3 shells to kill them. So in terms of the numbers, I think that the E75 on average should have not killed Quokka with one shot, and that gives them plenty of time to finish the game off. So I don't think that Quokka made a mistake there. Could they have approached from a different angle? Possibly, but considering where the E75 was, an approach from the northern pathway would have got Quokka noticed a lot sooner. Even outside of the corpses of the tanks that were there earlier, I don't think there is as much cover. It's difficult to judge from hindsight, but I think Quokka made the correct decision. So indeed, heartbreak for Quokka there, only doing 8,784 damage as well as picking up 9 kills wasn't enough, unfortunately, to take home the win in this instance. But nevertheless, a fantastic performance and some excellent decision making that really pulled back a team that was behind arguably the whole game all the way till the end, nearly coming out on top and really just getting shafted by RNG in the end. If you like this kind of video, please consider subscribing and giving it a like. It's the kind of stuff I intend to do, and it's kind of the stuff I'm really enjoying, sort of picking apart how gameplay comes together and how stronger players are contributing their team more effectively. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Enjoy whatever you're doing.